The morning my father's will was read out loud, I was sitting in a wooden chair in a lawyer's office, and my brother did not even look at me once. Not once. Not when they said my name had been removed. Not when they read the part about the house. Not when I felt the air leave my lungs and had to grip the edge of the table just to stay upright. He just sat there, very still, in a new suit with his wife beside him, and she was almost smiling. I had taken care of my father for 4 years. 4 years of doctors and medications and night calls and missed work and money I paid out of my own savings because the bills kept coming and no one else was writing checks. I cooked for him, I drove him. I slept on his couch during the bad weeks because I was afraid he would fall. I gave him 4 years of my life, and when the lawyer finished reading, I found out I had been left a single sentence. A sentence that said I had already received my share during my father's lifetime. I had received nothing. I did not know what that sentence meant. Not yet. But I was about to find out exactly what they had done, and it was so much worse than I imagined. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something honestly. If the people who were supposed to love you most spent years quietly taking from you while letting you believe you were helping, would you even recognize it while it was happening? Or would you do exactly what Nadia did and keep giving, keep showing up, keep believing the best, right up until the moment a stranger in a suit read a document that proved you had been erased? Stay with this story. Because the question of what Nadia did next is not simple, and neither is the question of whether she should have forgiven any of them at all. My name is Nadia, and I want to tell you something before I tell you everything. I am not a dramatic person. I have never in my life made a scene. I have never screamed at a family member, slammed a door, or sent a message I later regretted. I am the kind of person who absorbs things, who explains things away, who tells herself there must be a reason, there must be a misunderstanding, there must be something she is missing. I was raised to be that person. My mother raised me to be quiet and capable and grateful. My father raised me to believe that family was the highest thing, that you protected family, that you showed up for family even when it cost you. He said that to me so many times I used to say it in my sleep. I believed it completely. I built my life around it. So when my father got sick, there was never a question in my mind about what I would do. I was the oldest. My brother Kareem was 4 years younger, and he lived about 40 minutes away with his wife Sana and their 2 kids. I was single. I had a small apartment and a steady job as an office manager for a logistics company. I had my savings and my schedule and my weekends. And then my father got his diagnosis, and slowly, steadily, almost without me noticing how much was shifting, all of those things started to belong to his care. It started small, the way these things always do. A ride to an appointment here, a grocery run there, a call to the pharmacy because he forgot to pick something up. Then the appointments became twice a week, then 3 times, then I was the one talking to his doctors because my father had trouble following the medical language and he trusted me to translate it for him. Kareem came to visit on holidays. He sent a fruit basket once. He called our father on Sundays sometimes. I told myself this was fine. Kareem had children. Kareem had a demanding job. I had more flexibility. I was closer in my heart to my father anyway. We had always been close. He used to call me his right hand, so I leaned into it. I told myself I was choosing this, that it was a privilege to be useful, that one day I would look back and be grateful I had not missed this time with him. What I did not see, not yet, was that while I was giving everything I had to that house, to those doctors, to those long evenings sitting with a man who was slowly getting smaller, something else was happening in the background. Something quiet and deliberate. Something that had my name on it. The first sign came about a year into my father's illness. He had a bank account, a checking account he had used his whole life that I had helped him manage since my mother passed. He was not always sharp with numbers. After she was gone, he would sometimes lose track of bills of due dates. I had access to the account not to spend from it but to keep things organized. One afternoon, I was reconciling his statements and I noticed a transfer. It was not huge. $1,500 moved to an account I did not recognize. I asked my father about it and he said Kareem had needed help with something, a car repair. He said it was nothing, that Kareem was going to pay it back. I wrote it down. I told myself it was fine. 3 months later, there was another. $2,000. Same account. I asked again. My father seemed tired of the question. He said Kareem was dealing with something with the house. He said it was family money and it was fine and I should not worry about small things. I dropped it, but I kept the statements. I do not know why I kept them. At the time, I told myself I was just being organized. Looking back, I think some part of me already knew I needed a record. By the end of that first year, I had spent close to $9,000 of my own money on my father's care. Groceries, medications not covered by his insurance, a hospital bed we brought in during a bad month, a part-time home aide for 3 weeks when I had a work deadline I could not miss. I never thought of it as a debt. It was my father. You do not invoice your father, but I want you to understand the number. $9,000 in 1 year, and not $1 came from Kareem. I am not saying this to be bitter. I am saying it because I need you to understand what the pattern looked like before I could see it as a pattern. In year 2, my father's health stabilized a little. He was not getting better, but he was not in crisis either. He had good weeks and bad weeks. During the good weeks, he was still himself, still sharp in the morning, still someone who liked to watch the news and have an opinion about it. And during those good weeks, Kareem started coming around more. He and Sana would bring the kids. My father lit up when he saw the grandchildren. It made him happy in a way that nothing else could reach. I was glad they came. I genuinely was. I would make tea and sit in the other room so they could have their time, and I would tell myself that this was how it was supposed to be, that this was a family functioning. But I started to notice something. When Kareem came, he and my father would often go into the study and close the door. They would be in there for an hour sometimes. When I asked my father what they talked about, he would say business things, old memories, nothing important. He would change the subject. I did not push. That was my pattern. I did not push. What I did not know was that behind that closed door, Kareem was having a different kind of conversation, one that involved documents, one that involved my father's signature, one that I would not find out about for 2 more years. In year 3, I almost broke. Not emotionally, though that was happening too slowly in ways I could not name. I mean financially. I had gone through my emergency savings. I had taken 2 small loans. The part-time aide had become a full-time aide 3 days a week because my father's bad weeks were getting longer and I could not be there every hour. My employer was understanding, but there is a limit to how understanding an employer can be before your position starts to feel precarious. I had passed that limit. I was surviving on very little rest and a lot of love for a man who I could see was running out of time. I called Kareem. I want you to know I did not do this easily. I had told myself for years that I did not want to make him feel guilty, that I did not want to create conflict, that the important thing was my father's comfort and not a ledger. But I was drowning. I called him on a Tuesday evening and I laid it out as clearly and as calmly as I could. I told him how much I had spent. I told him the aid cost was now $1,100 a month. I told him I was not asking for the past, I was asking for the future. Could he contribute to the aid, even half, even $400 a month? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said he had his own expenses. He said the kids' school fees were higher than expected. He said his mortgage had adjusted. He said it was not a good time. He said he was doing what he could by visiting. He said he knew I understood. He said, and I remember this word for word because I have heard it in my head many times since, he said, "You're better at this than me, Nadia. Dad needs you, not me, you know that." I hung up the phone and sat on my kitchen floor for a while, not crying, just sitting. I said nothing to my father about any of it. I kept showing up. What else was I going to do? In the 4th year, my father got very sick very fast. It was a harder decline than any of us had expected. He stopped being able to walk without help. He had trouble eating. There were hospital stays, 2 of them, the second one lasting almost 3 weeks. I was there every day. I took unpaid leave from work. I watched my father get smaller and I held his hand and I told him he had been a wonderful father and I told him I was proud to be his daughter. Those conversations were real. That grief was real. Whatever was happening in the background, I want to be clear that the love was completely real. Kareem visited twice during the last hospital stay. Both times he arrived with flowers and left within an hour. The nurses assumed he was a family friend. One of them asked me once if I was the only daughter and I said yes. She nodded like that explained everything. My father died on a quiet Sunday morning. I was with him. Kareem arrived an hour later. We did not fight at the bedside. We were both too tired and too sad for that. We sat together in that hospital room and for a few hours we were just two people who had lost their father and none of the rest of it existed. I was grateful for those hours. Then the days after came, and everything else came with them. My father had a lawyer. His name was Mr. Osei, a careful man in his 60s who had handled my father's affairs for many years. He called us both within the week and scheduled the reading for the following Saturday. I went in calm. I expected something simple. My father was not a wealthy man, but he had the house, a modest savings account, and some small investments. I assumed it would be split equally. I assumed that was how it worked. I had never asked about the will. It had felt wrong to ask about the will while my father was alive. It had felt like rushing him toward the door. I sat in Mr. Osai's office on that Saturday morning. Kareem sat across from me. Sana was with him, which I thought was slightly odd since she was not a direct heir, but I said nothing. Mr. Os greeted us both and opened the folder and began to read. The will gave the house to Kareem. The savings account, approximately $43,000, went to Kareem. The investments, small as they were, went to Kareem. And then there was the sentence. The sentence that said Nadia had already received her share of the estate during her father's lifetime through financial support and compensation for caregiving services rendered. I did not understand it at first. I sat with those words and I turned them over and I genuinely could not make them fit into anything I recognized. Financial support. Compensation for caregiving services rendered. What did that mean? I had spent money on my father. I had not received money from him. I had not been compensated. I had been his daughter. I asked Mr. Os at what the sentence referred to specifically. He looked slightly uncomfortable. He said there was a document. He produced it from the folder. It was a signed statement, dated 14 months earlier, notarized, in which my father confirmed that he had transferred funds to Nadia over a period of 3 years as advance payment of her inheritance and in recognition of her caregiving role. The total listed was $61,000. I had received nothing, not $1. There was no transfer, there was no payment. I had spent my own money. I had taken loans. I had worked myself to the edge. I looked at Karim, he was looking at the table. My voice, when it came out, was very quiet. I asked Mr. Osai where the money had gone. He said he was only able to speak to the document, not to the movement of funds. He said if I had questions about specific account activity, I would need to pursue that separately. He said he was sorry. I stood up, I took a photo of the document with my phone, I thanked Mr. Osei. I picked up my bag, I walked out of that office, and I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time. I did not cry. I felt something colder than crying. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and rearranged something. I drove home, I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table and I opened my laptop and I started to look. I had kept everything. I want to tell you that because it matters. I am an organized person. I kept every receipt. I kept every bank statement, mine and my father's, from the years I had access. I kept every email I had sent to doctors, every invoice from the aid agency, every pharmacy receipt. I had not kept them because I expected a fight. I had kept them because that is who I am. I keep things. And that habit, that small, unglamorous habit, was about to become the most important thing I owned. I went through 4 years of my own bank statements first. I printed everything. I organized it by year. The money I had spent was documented to the cent. The total came to just over $32,000, money out of my own pocket into my father's care over 4 years. Then I pulled up my father's statements, the ones I still had from the years I managed his account. I started going through the transfers. The 1,500 I had asked about in year one. The 2,000 in year two, more after that. Transfers I had not seen because by year three my father's affairs had shifted and I had lost direct visibility into the account. I did not have records past a certain point, but what I had was enough to establish a pattern. The account those transfers went to, I had noted it years ago. I had the number written in a small notebook I kept in my kitchen drawer. I did not know whose account it was, but I knew it was not mine. I needed help. I called my friend Dina. Dina is a paralegal. She has been my closest friend for 15 years. She is the kind of person who does not panic, who listens completely, who asks the right questions in the right order. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Nadia, I think someone had your father sign something he did not fully understand, and I think the money those transfers refer to never went to you. She told me what to do next. She said I needed an estate attorney and I needed one before I said another word to Karim or Sana or anyone connected to them. She said I needed to protect my position. She said I had more than I realized. The receipts, the statements, the aid invoices, the loan records, the emails to the doctors that had my name on them and not Karim's. The paper trail of a woman who had done everything and been recorded as having received everything, when in reality she had received nothing and given everything. I called an estate attorney the following Monday. Her name was Mrs. Addo. She was direct in the way that I needed people to be direct right then, without softness but also without cruelty. I brought my entire file. She went through it quietly, making notes. At the end, she looked at me and said that what she saw was consistent with undue influence and financial manipulation of a vulnerable adult. She said the document my father had signed 14 months before his death, when he was already in cognitive decline, when he was already dependent on the people around him, that document had serious problems. She said the transfers I had documented going out of his account did not match what the estate document claimed had gone to me. She said this was a case worth pursuing. I asked her what I should do in the meantime. She told me not to sign anything, not to agree to anything, not to respond to any communication from Karim or his wife without running it past her first. She told me to act normal on the surface. She told me to wait. Waiting is hard when you are angry. I had not let myself feel the anger yet, not fully, because I had been too busy gathering evidence and making calls and holding myself together. But that evening, sitting in my apartment with a plate of food I could not eat, the anger arrived. It came in quietly, the way all the worst feelings do, and it sat down next to me and did not leave for a long time. I was angry at Karim, deeply angry. Not for taking more than his share of a will, not for wanting the house, not even for the money. I was angry because of the sentence. The sentence that said I had already been paid. The sentence that turned 4 years of love and sacrifice into a transaction and then called the transaction settled and then used my name on the receipt for money I never touched. The sentence was the part I could not get past because it was not just greed. It was a rewriting of the truth. It was taking what I had done with my heart and making it look like something I had done for money, and then saying the money had already changed hands and I was done, I was satisfied, I had nothing more coming. That was the part that felt like violence. I did not call Karim. I did not text Sana. I went to work every morning and I came home every evening and I worked on the case with Mrs. Addo on weekends and I kept my face very still whenever anyone asked me how I was holding up. About 3 weeks after the will reading, Karim called me. He sounded slightly nervous, which was unusual for him. He said he wanted to get together. He said it had been hard on everyone and he wanted us to process it together as siblings. He said he missed me. He said family was everything, which was something our father used to say, and hearing it in Karim's voice at that particular moment made my jaw tighten in a way I had to breathe through. I said that sounded nice. I said I was busy but maybe in a few weeks. I said I appreciated him reaching out. I kept my voice warm. I gave him nothing to read. What he did not know, what no one in his household knew, was that Mrs. Addo had already filed a formal challenge to the estate. She had filed on multiple grounds, including undue influence, lack of testamentary capacity at the time of the caregiving document signing, and discrepancy between the claimed transfers and documented account activity. She had also sent a formal request to the bank for full account records, which as a party to a contested estate we were entitled to receive. The bank records arrived 6 weeks later. I sat in Mrs. Addo's office on a Thursday afternoon and we went through them together. The transfers out of my father's account over the last 2 years of his life totaled just under $58,000. Every single one went to the same account. Not my account, not my name. The account belonged to Sana, Kareem's wife. I looked at that page for a long time. $58,000 moved from a sick man's savings into his daughter-in-law's personal account over 24 months, while his daughter was paying for his grow. Surrey's and his medications and his hospital parking and his home aid out of her own salary, while his daughter was taking loans, while his daughter was sleeping on his couch during the bad weeks because she was afraid he would fall. Mrs. Addo said we now had the core of the case. The claimed advance inheritance, the $61,000 the estate document referenced, did not match any transfer to me. It appeared to match very closely the transfers to Sana's account. The document my father had signed was fraudulent in its premise. He had not paid me. He had been paying Sana, and the document appeared designed to use those numbers to close out my inheritance claim while hiding where the money had actually gone. She asked me if I was all right. I told her I was fine. I think I meant it, in that dissociated way you can mean things when you are too deep in shock for normal feelings to reach. She filed the additional evidence. The case was now formally in probate court. I want to tell you what happened in the weeks between that Thursday and the court date, because the story did not pause while the legal process moved. The people in it kept moving. Kareem called again, 3 times. I returned the calls briefly and warmly and said nothing of substance. The third time he called, he mentioned that there were some estate formalities he needed me to sign off on, some transfer paperwork for the house. He said it was routine. He said it would be easier if we just handled it between us rather than involving lawyers. He used the word family 4 times in that call. He said our father would have wanted us to handle things quietly. I said I had already retained an attorney and that she would be in touch. There was a pause, then he said, Nadia, I really hope you're not going to make this complicated. I told him I was not making anything complicated. I told him I was just handling things carefully the way Dad had taught us. Then I said goodbye and ended the call. That was the last conversation Kareem and I had for a long time. Sana sent me a message 2 days later. It was long. It covered several different angles. It said that Kareem had only wanted to protect my father's peace of mind during his final years. It said the transfers had been agreed upon by my father himself as his way of distributing his assets during his lifetime. It said my father had been very clear about his intentions. It said she hoped I would not damage the family further. It said the children were confused about where Auntie Nadia had gone. It said she prayed I would find peace. I forwarded it to Mrs. Addo and did not reply. Dina came over that weekend with food and wine and sat with me for 6 hours while I talked and she listened. At one point I asked her whether she thought my father had known what he was doing when he signed that document. This was the question I could not stop circling. Because if he had known, if he had chosen this, then the grief I felt about losing him was tangled up with something else entirely. And if he had not known, if someone had sat with him in a quiet room while he was sick and tired and confused and guided his hand toward a signature, then I had been robbed twice. Once of the inheritance, once of the true ending. Dina said she did not know. She said it was probably somewhere in the middle. She said sick people can be told a version of the truth that feels true to them even when it is not. She said the kind of manipulation that leaves no bruises, that works slowly and quietly over years on someone who trusts the people around them, that was the hardest kind to see and the hardest kind to fight. I thought about my father saying the transfers were fine. I thought about him saying I should not worry about small things. I thought about him changing the subject when I pressed. I thought about whether someone had been in that room before those conversations happened, coaching him on what to say. I thought about how tired and foggy he had been in his last 2 years, how much he had needed to be led through things, and how much trust he had placed in the people who offered to lead. I cried for the first time that night, not for the money, for my father, for the possibility that he had been deceived in his own home by the people he trusted in the same years that I was giving everything I had to keep him alive, for the possibility that the love he had shown me was real and the paperwork was not, and I would never be able to ask him which one was true. The court date came in late spring. I want to be honest with you about what happened in that room because it was not dramatic in the way you might imagine. Probate court is not television. It is slow and procedural and everyone speaks carefully, but the weight in that room was real. Mrs. Addo presented our case clearly. She walked through the 4 years of care, she walked through my financial records, she walked through the aid invoices, the doctor correspondence, the loan documentation. She walked through my father's medical records from the last 2 years, which showed significant cognitive decline during the period when the contested document was signed. She walked through the bank records. She laid out the $58,000 in transfers to Sana's account. She laid out the complete absence of any transfer to mine. Kareem's attorney said the transfers to Sana's account were household management funds, money my father had chosen to route through her for practical reasons, that she had managed certain expenses on his behalf. He said my father had been of sound mind when he signed the document. He presented a letter from one of my father's doctors dated around that time suggesting he was stable. Mrs. Addo responded to that letter by presenting 3 other medical records from the same month showing documented episodes of confusion and disorientation. She noted that stable and cognitively unimpaired are not the same designation. She noted that none of the household expenses Kareem's attorney referenced had any corresponding receipts or documentation. She asked where the records were for $58,000 of household management. There were no records. The judge asked Kareem's attorney several questions. He did not appear pleased with the answers. The decision took 4 weeks to come back. I do not think I slept well for a single night of those 4 weeks. I went to work, I answered emails, I had coffee with Dina. I moved through my days like someone carrying something heavy and trying not to let it show. The ruling came on a Wednesday. Mrs. Addo called me. She said the document had been invalidated. The judge had found it was signed under circumstances that raised substantial concerns about undue influence and impaired capacity. The estate was to be redistributed. The house would be sold and the proceeds divided equally between Kareem and me. The savings account would be divided equally. The court had also found that the transfers to Sana's account, given the absence of any documentation of corresponding household expenses, constituted improper use of a vulnerable adult's funds. That matter was being referred for further review. I sat on my kitchen floor for the second time in the course of this story. This time I was not cold. I was not angry. I was something closer to exhausted relief, the kind that comes when you have been carrying a weight for so long that when it finally lifts your body does not quite know what to do with the absence of it. I thanked Mrs. Addo. She said I was very welcome and that she had enjoyed working with a client who kept such meticulous records. I want to tell you what happened after, because the after is important. The after is where you see what people are really made of. Kareem did not call me the day the decision came down. He did not call me the following day either. On the third day, he left a voicemail. He said he was sorry things had gone this way. He said he had always wanted what was best for everyone. He said he hoped we could move forward as a family. He said the kids missed me. He said our father would not have wanted us to be like this. I listened to the voicemail twice. I did not return it. Sana sent a message saying she hoped there were no hard feelings and that she had always respected me. I did not reply to that either. Mrs. Addo had told me something early in our work together that stayed with me. She said that people who do what Kareem and Sana did, they almost never apologize for the actual thing. They apologize for the situation. They say they are sorry things went this way. They say they are sorry there was conflict. They say they hope we can move forward. What they do not say is, I lied. What they do not say is, I manipulated a sick man's paperwork. What they do not say is, I transferred his savings into my wife's account while my sister paid his medical bills out of her salary. They do not say those things because saying them would require them to see themselves clearly, and people who do what they did are almost never able to do that. I understood that, and understanding it helped me let go of waiting for an apology that was not coming. The house sold 6 months after the ruling. I received my half of the proceeds. Combined with the savings account split, it was enough to pay off my loans, rebuild what I had spent during those 4 years, and have something left over. It was not a fortune. It was not what it would have been if I had never been erased from that will, but it was mine and it was documented and no one had given it to me as a favor. I used some of it to take a week off and go somewhere I had been meaning to go for years. I sat on a beach for 7 days. I read 3 books. I ate food that someone else cooked. I slept past 7 in the morning for the first time in longer than I could remember. On the 5th day, I sat watching the water and I tried to figure out what I felt. Not about Kay. Areem, not about Sana, not about the money, about my father, whether I was still angry at him, whether I could still love him the way I had loved him before that Saturday in Mr. Osai's office. I decided that I could. I decided that the version of my father who had sat with me through long evenings and let me hold his hand and called me his right hand was real. I decided that the version who had signed a document under circumstances I may never fully understand was also real, and that both versions could exist at the same time and that I did not have to choose between grieving him and being angry about what had been done. People are complicated. Love is complicated. The truth of a relationship is not erased by the things that happen at the end of it, but neither is the harm. When I came home from that week, I made 2 decisions. The first was about Kareem. I decided I would not pursue the relationship. Not in anger, not dramatically, not with any announcement. I simply stopped reaching, I stopped calling, I stopped checking in, I stopped being the person who held the family together because I had always held the family together and no one had noticed until it was gone. When his birthday came, I sent a message, brief and kind, but brief. He wrote back. We exchanged a few lines. It felt like two strangers being polite. I was at peace with that. The second decision was about myself. I decided I was done being someone who waits too long and gives too much and trusts the best version of people until the evidence makes trust impossible. Not because I was going to become hard or closed, but because I was going to start noticing earlier. I was going to start asking questions earlier. I was going to stop taking silence for safety and absence for agreement. I was going to keep receipts, not as a weapon, as a practice. As a form of self-respect. I went back to work. I asked for the raise I had been too scattered to ask for during those 4 caregiving years, and I got it. I started sleeping well. I started cooking things I liked instead of things that were easy. I started calling Dina not just when I was in crisis, but when something was good and I wanted to share it with someone. There is one more thing I want to tell you. About 8 months after the ruling, I received a letter, not from Kareem, from a woman I did not know. She introduced herself as a neighbor of my father's, someone who had lived 3 houses down for many years. She said she had heard that there had been a legal matter around my father's estate and she hoped I did not mind her writing. She said she wanted me to know something. She said that in the last year of my father's life, she had spoken to him a few times over the fence when he was able to sit outside. She said he had talked about me often. He had said that his daughter Nadia was the one who truly showed up. He had said he was proud of me. He had said more than once that he worried about me, that he hoped I knew how much he loved me, that he hoped I would be all right. She said she did not know if this was useful. She said she just thought I should know that he had said those things, that I had been in his thoughts, that whatever had happened in that lawyer's office, whatever documents had been signed or not signed, the man sitting in the afternoon sun talking about his daughter had been talking about a daughter he loved. I read that letter 4 times. Then I folded it very carefully and I put it in the drawer where I keep things I do not want to lose. I am Nadia. I gave 4 years of my life and $32,000 of my savings and every Tuesday evening and most of my weekends and 2 rounds of unpaid leave and a piece of my health to caring for a man I loved. I was written out of his estate with a sentence that was not true. I was left sitting in a lawyer's office without a single dollar and without a single apology and without even a look from the brother who had sat across from me. And then I went home and I opened my laptop and I found every document I had ever saved, and I found a lawyer who knew what she was looking at, and I let the truth do what truth does when it finally gets room to move. I did not scream. I did not humiliate anyone publicly. I did not call anyone names or send messages I would regret or drag anyone into social media. I just held the evidence and let the process work and waited for the day when the facts were the loudest thing in the room. That day came, and when it came, it was enough. I want to say one last thing. If you're reading this or hearing this and some part of it sounds like your life, if some part of it sounds like someone you loved, if some part of it sounds like something you have been explaining away or absorbing or carrying in silence, I want you to know that the receipts you have been keeping even without meaning to, the dates you remember, the messages you kept, the way you know exactly what happened even when everyone around you is telling a different version, those things matter. The truth does not always come out loudly, but it comes out. Hold your records, trust what you know. Stop rescuing people who are draining you, and do not wait until you are sitting in a parking lot with air leaving your lungs to start building your case. You are allowed to pay attention, you are allowed to protect yourself, and you are allowed to stop. Nadia never raised her voice. She never sent an angry message. She never made a scene. She just kept every receipt, found one person who believed her, and let the truth speak at full volume when it finally had the chance. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments, what was the moment you think she should have seen it coming? And if you have ever been the one in the family who gives everything while others take the credit, this one was for you. Share it with someone who needs to hear that quiet strength is still strength.